Hi, Toni.
Hey Shay, how are you?
How's it going with you?
It's all well, it's all safe, and I'm just so happy to be here today.
Thank you so much for being here. I want you to introduce yourself to our Cool Careers audience.
Okay, well, my name is Antoinette, otherwise known as Toni Hubbard, and I believe that we met some years ago. We'll probably get into more discussion around that. And I have been employed in healthcare after we went our separate ways from our previous careers. And that is where I led the diversity and inclusion for the system office of Trinity Health as vice president of D&I, or diversity and inclusion. And I worked there for 10 years before retiring. The good news is that while I was working, I became an accredited coach with the International Coaching Federation. And so that afforded me an opportunity to continue doing some work with talented leaders and aspiring professionals who wanted to move their career forward. And I coach them on their aspirations, their goals, their objectives, and help guide them so that they can figure out what is the best path for them to take.
Wow, I'm just beaming like when you're talking about your vice president role. I'm so proud of you, Toni. Thanks so much for being here. And so you're right. I definitely like to highlight that Toni and I worked together at Reliant Resources right after deregulation and the split of CenterPoint Energy. And I'm still gracious for all of the help that I received from Toni with for diversity and affirmative action reporting.
Oh yeah, I could not have done it without you, for sure.
And trust me, I definitely couldn't have done it without you as well. So I'm indebted to you forever for that. But we learned a lot, and we had a lot of fun. So those were good times.
Yes.
Toni, I really like to highlight, these sorts of things because I find that, relationships are really important. Can you tell us, either by a story or just kind of how you feel about connections and networking and how it's important to, one's career?
Well, I can say that I just gave the networking speech to my goddaughter yesterday. She's a teacher, and she is working on her master's degree and wants to move into a principal role by obtaining her PhD. But at any rate, I advised her that she needed to get on LinkedIn. I said, because you need to start posting and talking, and this is how you start to meet people that will hopefully come forward and coach or mentor and help guide in your career. I can say that coming up through the ranks of management, that I am actually an introvert. And so for a minute there, I was the quiet one at the table. And someone, tapped me on the shoulder and said, you need to get out more and start networking, finding your comfort level, leaning in to those fears of, just speaking out. And so I just started joining different professional organizations and attending those meetings where I met different people. And, we started to discuss our roles and, where we wanted to take our work to achieve success for the organizations that we worked in. And that was a big plus for me. And I tell everyone now, you have to network across the board. It doesn't always have to be in your industry. My mom used to tell me that you can always learn something from anyone, even somebody that you would not expect to have that knowledge and wisdom. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, I'm so with you on that one. So I like to start the conversation that way, just to kind of reiterate the importance of how it is. Now, what other things are important right now is diversity and inclusion. I mean, not only is a thing, it is also, what do you say, politically correct, is also trendy, It's
Yes.
So why don't you kind of walk us through your journey and how you got started in this D&I space?
Certainly. I was working at Reliant Energy in human resources alongside with you, actually addressing the federal compliance through the affirmative action programs that were required by us because we do business with the government. And what happened, our CEO attended a diversity roundtable for the CEOs in Houston, and this included leaders from Shell, from Texaco, some of you may remember Enron, and they all met at the table to talk about it. And this is back in 1990. And they were at least my CEO was so impressed by what he'd learned that day. He came home to the office and suggested that we start to develop a diversity and inclusion initiative. Well, doing the work of affirmative action, which is a compliance requirement through the federal government's Office of Contractor and Compliance Programs, I learned that it's a perfect segue into building your diversity and inclusion network. And it's a lot of work, though, a lot of work. And because in federal reporting requirements, organizations that do business with the government have to collect diversity data. They have to collect your race, your ethnicity, your gender, your sexual orientation, your military status, as well as if you're differently abled in the workplace. And so by gathering this information through the application process, we were able to generate reports that would afford us an opportunity to see whether or not when a requisition opened up, we had an opportunity to cast the net wider so that we could find talent that also happened to come from a diverse background.
So was that your first role in diversity, was with Reliant?
Yes, it was. It was.
So that was the beginning. And so
Yes.
afterwards, I know you said in your introductory, you talked about you being in healthcare for 10 years. Did you go straight from, when you moved from Texas, did you go straight to the healthcare industry when you moved to Michigan?
Absolutely. I was recruited by Trinity Health, which is one of the largest faith-based health systems in the United States. We operate in 22 states from coast to coast. So you can imagine the diversity initiative in Silver Spring, Maryland, looked very different from the diversity initiative in Boise, Idaho. But still, there's an opportunity beyond just simple race and ethnicity to incorporate our recruiting efforts as it relates to people that come from various backgrounds.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that now from a corporate perspective. Can you give us a little insight on why it's really important to have D&I in the workspace? And, this is from your perspective, of course, as you give advice to, organizations you work for.
Absolutely. It's been important for a long time, long before what's going on in the world today. Diversity and inclusion offices were usually housed under the human resources umbrella. There's been debate about whether it should sit there or be independent with a direct report to the CEO. I say it works either way as long as you have leadership that's on board and willing to support and model the behaviors that we need to see in organizations. The thing that really brought diversity to the forefront is that statistics showed us that the demographics in the United States were changing. We were no longer going to be a majority United States of America, and when it came to how we operate our businesses. And so therefore, we needed to recognize the fact that our talent is an asset to our organizations, regardless of their walk of life. and their values, their perspectives, that they should be viewed as an asset to the organization. Now, asset is the key word there, because normally diversity or someone who's different has not been considered an asset. But what organizations have learned to do is to look at their customer base and see who is doing business with them. And I would say that they need to also represent the communities that they serve. Every community has something different that falls within all the elements of diversity. And we need to be able to speak to that from a corporate perspective.
And I want to go and kind of touch on something you've already kind of talked about, the application process. Let's talk about how all of this affects the job seeker. Because as a recruiter, a lot of people feel very, I would say, apprehensive about completing some of the forms. They feel like it may work against them. And so just to put it in plain English so everyone will know what we're speaking about, is when you're applying to a role as a job seeker, with an application, in most cases, there are, as you already spoke of, Toni, a gender form, a form about your race. It's an identification form for you to self-disclose which box you tick, right?
Right. It's a voluntary self-disclosure form. And how it impacts the job seeker is when they make an application to an organization and they come across that voluntary disclosure, asking about their race, asking about their ability, physical ability, asking about their military status. That is not something that stays with that individual's application. And so we ask that in the beginning, and due to technology, we now have what we call an electronic requisition process. And once completing that self-identification form, it is actually electrically separated from their application. And the reason why we collect it at the application process is that the Office of Federal Contractors and Compliance Programs wants to ensure that we are making a good faith effort, to reach out and identify talent that is diverse in race and differently abled, LGBTQ, and military status, just to name a few. Now, once that applicant has been called in for an interview and they are selected for that role, then they are asked to identify again. And again, that document is kept separate from their HR personnel file. However, because of the reporting requirements of the federal government, we have to have the data in order to show that we are following the law. OFCCP is here to make sure that we are practicing diverse initiatives throughout all of our business lines, as well as to protect our employees. And they will enforce the law.
Right. Which is why, so I think this is a really good explanation, because you're saying that those documents go away and those forms go away to a separate group who analyze that information, which is you have to re-complete the form as an actual employee, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
So I'm sure you've probably had to discuss this many times. Is there anything to be said to an applicant to make them feel more comfortable about filling out the forms?
Well, I would say that the applicants in this era are really smart and diligent in their research of an organization before they even apply. They want to see your diversity and inclusion statement online. They want to see what your leadership looks like. They want to see what your board looks like, board of directors look like. Many of them already know what your customer base looks like. So you want to be prepared to bring in someone who possesses those same talents and skills and knowledge as anyone else, regardless of their race or ethnicity, regardless of whether they're in a wheelchair or have participated in a military campaign.
So let's kind of talk about, let's move through the process of you being an employee, right? So you come on board, they've hired you. And if there's any type of, I would say, complaint or grievance or situation, does that typically start in the D&I group?
It depends on the practice and policies of various organizations. Where I worked, both places where I worked, there were different paths to make a report regarding feeling as though you have been discriminated against based on one of the protected categories that the government has defined. And if it was coming from your supervisor, you don't want to report it to your supervisor. So you have the option of either going to your HR representative or the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Many organizations have a EEO office that addresses those. And you want to feel comfortable in reporting what you thought or perceived as a discriminatory act.
Would someone start with the making an EEO complaint externally as their first, I would say?
That's a possibility. That's a potential. But if an organization is wise, I would think they would want to plot out different areas of reporting so that they could address this in-house. And that's not to try to sweep it under the rug or keep it secret. You want to show that you have the ethics and mores, to address the needs of your employees, whether it's good or bad.
Right. So tell us about a bit of, when we speak about diversity awareness and training, what are the now trends of combating workplace in these days? Or are they different from years ago, or do they tend to change as time goes on?
I would hope it changes for the better. I would say in the beginning, when diversity and inclusion initially kicked off, we had to have and still have to have accountability and leadership that gets it and wants to make sure that this is drilled down throughout his organization, his or her organization. And so accountability starts at the top. And when you have a good leader like that recognizes this need to create awareness of the different assets that different people bring, it's key. I mean, awareness training is just the start. There's other activities and learnings that need to continue, not only to create the awareness, but also to address the implicit biases that each one of us have.
And diversity now I know in our day, in my day, because you've always done diversity. In my day of diversity was mostly gender and race. That was the kind of key components that we were speaking of. But now so many other facets of that, and we've become a bit more open-minded with disabled individuals that actually have careers.
Yes.
And what I mean by disabled, I also mean physically disabled as well. Mm-hmm. Military, all these various areas. When we speak about hiring the disabled, are companies making accommodations for the disabled employees? Well,
first of all, I like to not to squash your definition of that. I like to call them differently able.
Okay, differently able. I like
differently abled. Because they're still able to bring their talent and skill sets to the table as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just sharing.
This is all about learning, that's right.
And so, there are laws out there to protect individuals who might need a ramp as opposed to a stairway to enter the building, or a larger restroom, to attend to. And under the Americans with Disabilities Act, we have that regulation in place where organizations that meet a threshold of the number of employees they hire, as well as the amount of dollars they do in business with the federal government, have to adhere to. So yes, you have to give them reasonable accommodation, and you do it during the application process, actually.
Right. As long as you are acknowledging and letting the company know that there is a disability. Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Which is why we're talking about this, because this is why it's important to fill out the paperwork, because you might
absolutely
that your company has to adhere to. But if they don't know you have a you have a difference to accommodate you, then and then they can't accommodate you without knowing. So that's why I really wanted to reiterate that. Can you tell us a bit about how hiring practices are changing, with the political climate? Do you think this is helpful or hurtful in hiring practices?
I believe it's helpful because it represents who we are as a country. We always were growing. We were always diverse. But now, behind the laws, after Title VII, Civil Rights Act in 1964 as amended, we have more steam behind this initiative. And I would say that organizations also realize, as I mentioned before, who their customer base is. And this could be Target, this could be a hospital that, serves the people in their community. It includes those who are underserved in our community. We need to be cognizant of those individuals as well. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think the business of D&I is booming right now. I've had several calls.
Yeah.
And I've talked to several of my former colleagues who have been approached as well. So it's important because the shifting demographics in the United States speak for themselves. The graduate statistics speak for themselves regarding individuals from all walks of life. People who work hard to enter into an organization need to have the opportunity not only to make the application, but we need to ensure that our testing, has been validated and ensures that there's no discrimination in how we deliver those tests in order to hire people.
So does that sound, so it sounds like you might be busy post-retirement, right?
Yeah, a little busy. I try not to get too busy.
That's a good thing. Now, lastly, Toni, can you tell me about mentorship? Did you have a career mentor?
Oh, yes.
Okay, tell us about this.
Well, there's a difference between a mentor and a coach. And I think people should have one of each if they're fortunate enough to do so. Where a mentor speaks to you based on their wisdom and experience, a coach sits down with you and allows you to answer your own question pretty much. As I am accredited with the International Coaching Federation, you would want that person to come to you with a situation and talk about, what's going on and guide them into how they can address and achieve the outcome that they would like to see. Whereas a mentor can give you advice, coaches cannot. And a mentor can give you advice. They can introduce you to the right people, because beyond coaches and mentors, then you need sponsors and you need champions. And all of those impact how your career moves forward. And it's key to how we develop the talent in our companies and organizations.
And so you had a mentor, and are you mentoring now, even post retirement?
Yes, I think life is a mentor opportunity. Yeah. And even in retirement, being around family, being around former colleagues, and what really makes you feel good is that when those colleagues reach out to you after receiving a promotion or getting a new job in an organization they wanted to go to, and say they owe it to me, I said, no, you did that. You did that. But I'm pleased that you were able to have the wherewithal to realize that mentors are good for you. Mentors are absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm real pleased about a mentor program that we established at Trinity Health, where we were able to bring executive leadership on board to have a mentor relationship with employees who were aspiring, to do different things in their careers. This was twofold, as it was a mentor relationship, but it also created the networking aspect of it all. So
it goes hand in hand, right?
It goes hand in hand. It does.
Because I love diversity so much, I could talk to you all day.
Oh, me too.
This has been so great. Thanks for explaining all of this for us. I think this is going to be really helpful for a lot of people, which is why I asked you to be here with me today, and I'm so grateful. So thanks so much, Toni. And whenever I need anything diversity related, trust me, I know who to call.
My pleasure, Shay. It was great working with you today.
Yes, you too as well. Thanks so much, Toni.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.